Somebody said if you're at an impasse trying to make a decision on a deal, you just choose the route that will give you the better story. And so I think we might need to be a little careful with that adage, but we definitely got a good story out of this one. Our only out of pocket was the $3,000, right? So we took control of a $230,000 asset for $3,000.
This is a deal where there's going to be no competition, right? Because the margin is already very tight. There's going to be nobody else fighting you for this deal. And because the property owners, the interest holders were so close to an absolute loss, you could pick up deeds, aggregate control in the property with very little money out of pocket, which as a business owner, I look at that as risk, a very low risk deal.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Clint back with a better microphone. Hey, thanks for jumping in to the third episode of the Messy Million podcast. We just finished recording. I really think you're going to like this episode if you're interested in these kind of deals. Jeremy and I talked about a variety of different strategies for a deal that in hindsight, we probably wouldn't do again, but it did teach us a lot along the way. So if you're interested in doing these kind of deals, stick around and enjoy the Kuldell deal.
Well, here's what we have on deck today. In our last episode, we did our biggest and most lucrative deal thus far. And you made a point, an important point during the episode, that not every deal looks like this when you're working through messy title deals. And I thought it would be kind of cool and appropriate to bookend that episode with an episode about a deal that's on the other end of the spectrum. And so that's what I have queued up for us today. We're going to talk about the Kuldell deal, where we didn't make a lot of money, but we solved a lot of problems, learned some really good lessons, and actually, I think it makes for a fantastic story, especially for people who are investors and considering or interested in adding a new, new tool to the tool belt. What do you think about that?
Making, I don't remember how much we made, 20 or 30K. It's never a bad day, right? I need to look up who said this quote, but somebody said if you're at an impasse trying to make a decision on a deal, you just choose the route that will give you the better story. And so I think we might need to be a little careful with that adage, but we definitely got a good story out of this one.
Oh, 100%. And to that end, let's jump in. And to be honest, we closed this back in November, the sale. So it hasn't really been top of mind for a little while. So before you and I got together just now, I was going through the file to sort of refresh my memory. And this was one of the first deals that came in through paid ads for us.
Yes.
Yeah, we got a phone call on our main line that a team member took, and it went really well. And he put this woman, I won't share her name, but he put this woman on my calendar. It was a very cool experience to have paid ads generate an opportunity like this, an opportunity where we made significantly more money than we had spent on ads up until that point.
Yeah.
I don't think we've spent that much on ads the entire year, actually.
No, if you look at the return on ads, it's astronomical, which is once again why I'm excited about this little niche of a niche, is because the two things I always love is just like return on ad spend that just makes no sense. It's so high, and good opportunities to deploy capital. So those are the two things we're seeing. And this, I have to give credit to Jeremy for the paid ads side of this. We weren't doing anything, or we were really just going through our process of finding these things manually, if you will. And Jeremy stood up, I feel like in a weekend, like a website and a brand and an ad set to start generating opportunities through Google. And it just kind of took off. So was this our first one through that?
This was...
I think so.
Actually, you know what? Another deal came in around the same time, which we'll have to do on another episode. But this was one of the first. This was one of the earliest.
Yeah.
And you're right, I did stand it up. Like, I had been thinking about it, but I stood this all up in a weekend. And we've got a ton of experience running paid ads, but I'd never run anything on Google. And so it was pretty messy right out of the gate. But it's all a black box. I don't know why it worked so well for us from day one, but I think it has something to do with the fact that, well, there's a lot of people competing for people searching for like, "Hey, I wanna sell my home for cash." There's not a lot of people competing for eyeballs from people who, like, have $100,000 in unpaid taxes. You ready to get into it? I wanna tell you the story that this woman laid out when I first spoke with her.
Yep, go for it.
All right, so, this is a very well, this deal is atypical in some ways, but very bread and butter in others, and this part that I'm about to tell you is super common. I've heard this 100, maybe 1,000 times in the last year, but this woman said, "Hey, a distant relative was on title for the house or owned the house, passed away, but she told me that I could have it." And so, years ago, me and my husband, we moved in and, um, but we had a couple of problems, um, you know, and we wanted to turn it into a rental, but then like the tax deferral ended and there were all these taxes due and we wanted to like get a payment plan and it didn't really work out. And so long story short, she was like, "Listen, there's a pending tax lawsuit. I am petrified that I'm about to be on the receiving end of a foreclosure and a judgment that may wreck my credit, or at least ruin background checks for her, into the future." And she said, "I need help. I talked to a bunch of other people, and they all basically told me, 'Sorry, there's really not much I can do for you.'" And I was like, "Okay." I hear an airship issue. I hear that you've tried everything else that you could think of, and that nothing else worked. This is like squarely, at least superficially, in our buy box. And that's how it got started.
Yep. And I don't know where you want to go next with this, but I do want to say the reason we did this deal, just to be completely transparent, after sitting down and breaking the numbers out, we kind of just wanted to prove the concept. We wanted to say, hey, like, can we do a deal through this? And this one looks like we have pretty low risk and probably won't lose money, probably won't make a ton of money. But it was just an opportunity to see if, a lead from something that's kind of non-traditional for us, we could take the distance. And spoiler, we did. So let's talk about how we did it.
Yeah. Well, you were right. I remember that we had a meeting and we were talking about whether it actually made sense for us to pursue this because here's what the numbers looked like. When I spoke to her, the unpaid taxes were $166,000. That is an immense tax bill. We went to go underwrite the property. Um, it was definitely worth more than that. Um, we wound up selling it, I think, in the low 200s, which actually I think is around where we underwrote it. And we're like, after legal fees, after the taxes, after buying deeds, we're not gonna lose money on it, but is it really gonna be worth our time if it takes 2, 3, 4 months? And I remember what we said. We looked at the number of deeds we thought we might need to pick up because it has a very messy family tree. And I was like, dude, there's like 20 people who potentially have an interest in the property. And you said, okay, if we need to get deeds from all of those people, we're not doing it. And at that point, it was earlier in the year. I was like, that's fair, but I don't really know how many people we need deeds from. So,
Just to back up one little bit,
yeah,
it took us a while to put the family tree for that one together.
it did.
I think it
Yeah.
took us talking to some of the people in the tree to ensure we had the tree correct.
Yeah, the first woman that I spoke to, she didn't know the complete family tree. And this is just like the Langdon deal. The people who are on title, actually, it was one person, this guy. He had no kids, he had no siblings, and he was never married. So you had to go, and obviously no will, right? His estate was not administered. So we had to go up the family tree, out on the maternal and the paternal sides, and then back down. The woman we spoke with, was on one or the other, the maternal or the paternal. So she knew a little bit about her side of the family. She knew nothing about the other side of the family. So she knew like a third of what was ultimately the family tree or the big pool of potential interest holders. And you're right. I don't think we had that much confidence when we got into the process of reaching out to everybody. It was still a question mark.
Hey guys, what's up? Clint here. Sorry to interrupt the episode. I just want to let you know you are listening right now to a lot of jargon, a lot of different strategies and things that probably all require their own 30-minute episode. And I wanted to jump in and tell you on January 23rd, we are going to be hosting a webinar where I am going to be going in depth on a lot of these different topics. If you've ever been to one of my webinars, you know that they are not fluff. They're all value. I spend a lot of time doing them, so I only do a couple of them a year. So if you're interested in going a little deeper on a lot of the things we're talking about, check out the description, or you can just go to our website, learn.land, to get registered, and you'll be added to the list. And yeah, on January 23rd, we're going to be going over a lot of the strategies as well as how you can start finding these deals. So I think it's going to be super beneficial. Check out the description or go to our website to get registered. Okay, jumping back into the episode.
I just wanted to say there's, to highlight, there's a lot of work that goes into kind of just figuring out, like, does this deal make sense? Like, if we had to pick up deeds from 2 or 3 or 4 people to make, 20 or 30,000, that's a reasonable task. Might be slightly outside of our newest version of our buy box, but it's right there, right? And frankly, just going to depend on workload. Like, do we have a lot more deals that are more lucrative than that one, or is this what's in the pipeline? We should do it. But there's a lot of work that goes into figuring out if these deals make sense, because I did not, like you said, want to go pick up deeds from 20 people to maybe make 20 or 30 grand. And there's always a holdout. There's always somebody who wants to be difficult, right? So if we were going to have to go that wide, it probably just wasn't going to be worth it for the margin of that deal.
Right. And when you're talking about that many deed holders, it's partially the economics of it and also like the team bandwidth. Like that's actually that's a heavy operational lift. So what we did at the time was we put the whole file in front of our lawyer and said, hey, we need you to tell us exactly how many deeds we need to pick up. And he came back and the number was 8. Is it 8 or 9, something like that?
And so real quick, very important point there. Why, like some people might be thinking, why didn't you go to the title company first and ask them, like, why didn't you go to the title company and ask how many deeds you need to pick up?
Because if you go to a title company and you have an unadministered, the person on the vesting deed has an unadministered estate, all they're going to give you on the title commitment is we need all the interest holders from the estate of so-and-so. They're not going to do the work of investigating the family tree and putting that all together. So you don't actually advance the ball at all, not in a meaningful way.
And sometimes they will, though. I mean, it depends on the readiness and availability of the people that are in that estate. Going up and out, probably not. And what's really important to kind of highlight why this whole deal worked at all is a lot of time what gets put on title, as long as there was a reasonable and meaningful attempt to do it correctly, will often be considered what title is, right? Especially for a property that hasn't had anything of record, right? Nothing in the deed records or land records for half a century. So there's a really big, like, family trees can get very messy as you go back up and out. Who has life estates, who doesn't, who has a partial interest, who doesn't, whose ex-spouses do or don't. It can be very complicated, and often there isn't a direct one-for-one yes or no. Like sometimes it can get so complicated that it's like, it'd be more about based on what the judge thought and like 5 or 6 other legal things that I'm not going to try and come and find the vocabulary for right now. But when our attorney gave us an opinion, and obviously that opinion worked for us, we said, hey, let's take a gamble and let's do it this way, right? Because if you see nothing on title for 60 years, that means nobody has made an attempt to transfer this property out of whoever bought it in the 60s or 70s, right? And then they died and the taxes accumulated for 10 or 20 years. Obviously, nobody's coming back to attack that title, or else something would have probably got, filed as pendants, some sort of notice or some sort of legal action to clear the title. So when you come in with a clear set of deeds and a clear affidavit that says this is what the heirship situation is on this property, and then you go to the title company and you have them run it, they're going to say, hey, look, that big law firm prepared that. And they put together that family tree and collected all those uniform deeds. That looks like that's what the title's going to be, right? And so I don't know if you want to expand on that at all, but
I do.
Yeah, go ahead.
You raise a really good point, and there actually was something on title for this property concerning heirship, because the woman we talked to had engaged in a little bit of self-help by going and downloading a form affidavit of heirship without really understanding how to complete them and what's required under Texas state law and what the title companies require, which is a little different. And so she just wrote, hey, here's the name of the person who's on the last deed. My great aunt, who's still alive, she knew everybody and she knows that it's supposed to go to me. And so what they did for the affidavit of heirship is they just do the 3 points without filling in the complete picture. Right. So totally ineffective, inadequate affidavit. But when we first look at the pending tax lawsuit and have a list of the defendants in there, that's what they did. They referenced this incomplete and ineffective affidavit to figure out who to name as defendants. And that was it. So if we had gone and gotten a TBD commitment before doing all of our own work, that's probably what it would have said on there. We need deeds from these 2 or 3 people, and then you're good to go. If they would have accepted it. Honestly, they would not have accepted it because it was missing some of the formalities. But that's what they would have done. Anyhow, since we knew that wasn't going to get us the roadmap that we needed, we went to our lawyer, who has a ton of experience doing this type of work and supporting investors like us. So he was able to give us a playbook that we could work with. And when he came back with 8 or 9 Ds or whatever it was, we're like, shoot, I guess we got to do this deal now.
Yeah, and the question was, I don't remember exactly what it was. It was something to the effect of like, does it split off up the tree or not, right? Because the lady we were working with, she had a good connection with these 8 people that we need to get deeds from. And the other 10, 12, whatever it was, were kind of on a very distant side of the family. And nobody really knew him and knew how to contact, or, we could have figured out how to contact him, but would have been a lot more challenging to engage. And, they weren't all on the same team. And there was a discrepancy up the tree on, well, does ownership vest that way through the intestate laws? Our lawyer said no. And so we got the deeds on the side that we were able to work with, and then took it to title and got a clean commitment.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a really lucky break. The deal would not have been doable otherwise, and the property would have been sold at tax sale had we not.
Oh, and one more thing. We bought those deeds for $100, right?
Yeah, I mean, we almost skipped over one of the most important parts of the story, which is once we had the playbook from our attorney, we had to go and go down that whole list, one name at a time, connect with them, bring them, first of all, explain to them that this is not some weird new scam that they need to be worried about, that we're real people and we're working with one of their relatives. But we had to educate them, explain that the property was about to be lost, and explain, that we were trying to recover the property, mainly for our primary point of contact, this woman who initially reached out to me. She was going to be getting the somewhat larger payment than everybody else. But we had to do all of that and then have them agree to sign a deed and some other documents and accept a payment that we believe was low enough that we could minimize our risk, which, because we didn't expect to make a lot of money, we were very concerned about getting upside down in the deal and encountering a holdout who said, nope, I need 5,000 or I need 10,000. right? Because that's a situation where you're like, oh, there's not enough. We have like, 9/10 of the property, but there's not enough margin to sue this holdout to make them come to the table and agree to a more reasonable number. So we were extremely cautious in this deal, and it worked in this case. When we got to a point where we had all deeds in hand, our total out-of-pocket expenses between legal fees, payments to interest holders, mobile note, all the things, I think it was like $3,300 or something like that. Very reasonable.
Yeah. I mean, that was the big problem, was that I kept saying is, hey, if we hit one holdout, we can't do this deal.
Mhm.
Right. And I want to go into one thing real quick, just from a listener's perspective. How long did that take, would you say, to go to get all those deeds with knowing the ringleader?
I think we spent 3 weeks collecting deeds, and,
Okay.
like, I wasn't doing it, and you weren't doing it, and nobody on our team was doing it. We had outsourced the work.
That's where I was going, is there are ways, like, you could be saying, oh, well, it's not like a 20 or $30,000 deal is great, but I don't want to spend 3 weeks and 20 hours on the phone or 10 hours on the phone telling the same story, hunting it down, only to maybe or maybe not do the deal. There are ways to outsource, and that looks different, and I'm not going to dive into it too deep on this episode, but that's what I wanted to hit, is that there are resources, and this is why I like this niche a lot, is because there are pretty much for every time-consuming task, there's a professional resource that you can outsource to, right? There's somebody that like fits into the flow of money of how these deals work to do the legal work, do the field work, do pretty much any of the, do the title work. Like there's somebody at each step of the way. And if you can build that Rolodex, which is not as hard, I think, as some people might expect it to be, if you can build that Rolodex, you can tackle pretty much any problem that comes up.
Yeah, that's right, and this is something we could have done internally, but we just made a decision at the time to outsource it. We have a very lean and very experienced team that we're working with right now, but even if it were just you or were just me, this is not an immense amount of work to pick up 8 or 9 deeds. Um, but it just so happens here we outsourced it. And so this is a total estimate, but somebody asked, I was talking to somebody about this deal weeks ago, and the total amount of team time, like man hours that we put into this deal, is in the 3 to 5 hours range, tops.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just thinking about it, obviously, from my point of view. Somebody else's point of view could be like, heck yeah, like I want to get on the phone and go make 30 grand, right? So there's definitely two ways to look at it. But yeah, for us and the core team, we could have done it if it was, and that was another thing. We had a bunch of other deals going on. I was like, I don't want all my core team bandwidth to be going after this, small deal. Let's let the if we can put all the subcontractors in the pro forma and still make money with a low risk, then let's do it, right?
And this is, yeah, exactly. Um, I don't remember what we were working on at the time, but we were concerned about team bandwidth. But I just remembered one of the big reasons that I wanted to talk about this deal today is that if you are just getting exposed to distressed acquisitions, messy title deals, or whatever you want to call it, for the first time, the last deal we talked about might seem like really intimidating. To spend $100,000 on interest outside of title without title insurance, to some people sounds crazy and unachievable. This deal is, the complete opposite, I hope, for some of you listening out there today. This is a deal where there's going to be no competition, right? Because the margin is already very tight. There's going to be nobody else fighting you for this deal. And because the property owners, the interest holders, were so close to an absolute loss, you could pick up deeds, aggregate control in the property with very little money out of pocket, which as a business owner, I look at that as risk, a very low risk deal. And relative to some of the other deals we do, the net profit was not huge. But if you look at it strictly from a cash on cash return basis, that's a great deal. It's $3,000 in, 20 plus back in profit. Who wouldn't want to do that? But I just want people to listen to the story and understand that you can ease your way in to distressed acquisitions by looking for these deals that have reasonable, modest margins, highly distressed interest holders, because you have the ability to structure your investment in such a way that you never have much exposure.
And let's talk about that real quick. So, and just to go over the numbers, there was about I think it was 170K in taxes. We spent $3,500 or whatever it was on deeds, another $2,000 in legal fees, and we sold it for I think around 220, right? So I think we made somewhere in the $30,000 range on it. Our only out of pocket was the $3,000, right? So we took control of a $230,000 asset for $3,000, right? And it was a set of circumstances that allowed us to do that. Obviously, nobody was going to go in like we were talking about this. We don't have sometimes the tax bill is low enough to where you're like, well, if I run out of time, then I'll just pay the taxes, right? Well, the tax bill is it's probably 175K with fees and everything out the door. And they'd already defaulted, I believe, or something to where they didn't want to do a payment plan. And even a payment plan, I don't want to spend 80 grand and then spend 10 grand a month for the next year on this little, $230,000 house. So anyway, we were able to use the taxing authority as the bank, if you will. They had the primary mortgage on the property. And so all we had to do was come in and aggregate the interest. And we did it in such a way where we bought all the deeds. I think it's pretty interesting. Jeremy, the lady you talked to, I think we bought all the deeds for like $100 a piece or something, but I think he paid that lady a little bit more.
Yeah, we wound up paying her $2,000 or $3,000, but I told her up front, listen, there's a really good chance that we're not gonna be able to get all of these deeds and get the deal done and stop the tax sale. So I told her, I'll do this with you. I will give it my best shot. We're equipped to do this if it can be done, but I need to hold back the majority of your payment until we've gotten across the finish line. And in this case, the finish line was not just aggregating the interest, but selling the property. So we paid for all of the major expenses out of the sale proceeds. The balance of the fee to her, the 170 plus thousand in taxes, and those were the major expenses.
How you want to land this plane?
I think we should just talk about the key takeaways. Oh, you know what? There's one other little nugget I want to share here because it relates to the amount of taxes. There's simply no way, even with a payment plan, that we were going to pay any portion of those taxes until we were free and clear and safe on the deal. But the deal came to us relatively late in the foreclosure process. And so we had to find a way to kick that can down the road without going too out of pocket. And that's where we actually brought our lawyer back in to assist with that. I told the lawyer, what we needed to do. I told him I didn't want to get a payment plan, but I also wanted to forestall the tax sale. So he was able to do that for us. He was able to get the tax sale, not canceled, but delayed by several months with basically one email to the lawyers representing the taxing authorities. How did he do you remember how he did that? Or maybe I was handling this.
Oh, no, but I think he was, if I remember correctly, the lawsuit only served a few people and there was
Yep.
a dozen more people.
And we've seen this so many times. I don't know what's going on with the law firms who have these contracts, but yeah, he went through the docket for the tax lawsuit, and even the people who had an interest and were properly named as defendants didn't get served. So this is like a constitutional due process requirement. You can't divest somebody of their interest in land without giving them notice. And so he just went to them and said, hey, you guys got a major problem. You need to stop the tax sale. You need to go back, redo this work, do it right, or the judgment and the sale are not going to stick. And they begrudgingly did that. They pulled the property from the upcoming tax sale and went through this process of trying to find all the people that we had found and serve them properly and all that good stuff, which takes a long time. That was a huge deal, and it was a huge value add for the interest holders because, again, they didn't want to be associated with the judgment and the foreclosure and all that stuff. So anyhow, that was like the last really interesting, problem-solving tactic that we developed on this deal. So let's do like high-level takeaways. I've got a couple in mind, but what comes right to mind for you?
The first one that comes to mind is this is not a deal that we're probably going to do typically, but I would recommend anybody that has this opportunity on their plate as their first messy deal to do it. And I mean that because you just heard us talk about it's probably 5 or 6 different strategies we used all in this one deal. And we used almost every single one of those strategies in the deal we talked about in the last episode. That deal made 20 times what this deal made, but it was the same, almost kind of down to it, Jeremy, like a lot of the very same skill sets. And so you're not going to learn the skills to do these deals when they show up on your doorstep. You're not going to have the skill set to do the big deal until you do the small deal, right? Unless you got a bunch of experience and some cash laying around that you don't mind potentially losing. So this is, we've done a few deals as we've started that we, in hindsight, probably wouldn't do again. But I tell everybody I would do them in a heartbeat given the moment in time because it taught us how to do these deals and to refine our box in order to, really figure out what should we target. So
That covers almost all of the takeaways I wanted to jump into. But just to reiterate, I guess, or put a slightly finer point on it, um, this flavor of real estate investing has something to offer to all investors, regardless of their experience level. Obviously, not every interest holder is going to accept an offer that you make, but you can craft offers on virtually every opportunity that lands on your desk that protects you from a risk perspective and also ensures that you see a return that is going to be worth your time, trouble, and all that good stuff. And that's exactly what this deal demonstrates.
one good one and one average one. Good
Yeah.
way to get this thing going. All right, everybody. Thanks for jumping on the third episode of Messy Million. Stay tuned. We'll see you in the next one. Jeremy, see you soon.
Bye, everybody.